I wanted to talk about something that I mentioned earlier, which is that basically I'm trying to now embrace who I was when I was younger, specifically in the context of like the image I kind of like try to override what was actually happening. So for example, I keep talking about sometimes how I'm not shy, and to some extent that is true. Like I can be very not necessarily clueless, but like careless with the way that I kind of like interact, which it's kind of like makes it, it's the opposite of shyness in some ways. But there are ways in which I'm a little bit more hesitant, and I kind of had to accept that. This is something that even like a couple of days ago, I was going on about, and I was like, I'm not shy, but I kind of am. Maybe not in every context, and like right now, many years later, like I am more not well rounded is not the word I'm looking for. I'm more okay getting out there and like being out there. But when I was 17, thinking about decades ago when I was in high school, uh, yeah, some of my there was the element of like me not wanting to interact with people. So like there was lack of desire, but also I even if I wanted, what could have I done? What would have I done? It wasn't really in my nature at that point to reach out, and there were opportunities when things were kind of like to me, so like I could have taken them, but for the most part I think that I kind of like in my head I created the scenarios, the situations in which things had to happen in a very specific way for me to feel comfortable going out there, and they never were. So and that led to like even when I did have some type of opportunity for me to like not really seize it. And I mean honestly, this is something that like I'm talking about a decade ago, like even like half a decade ago, like 5 years ago, I would not have done it. I still would have been kind of like stuck. So like it is an ongoing thing. I just have to kind of like accept, have to accept the past, the way that things happen, and I have to kind of like quit those rationalizations that I kind of like did for so long that made it seem like I was closer to this version that I have of myself. Also like guys, well, being shy, like that is number one, that kind of like persists to this day. Me always feeling kind of like defensive about it. I think if you go back in the channel and you watch other videos, you find many examples of me just being like, I'm not really shy. People say I'm shy, but I'm not shy, and that's not true. I kind of am, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, I mean, of course, like it's something you have, it gets in the way of you doing things, achieving things. Like it's not great, but it's not. I'm not at that point. It's just regular shyness, and because I am a more reserved person, so there's that. But like so it is multiple things. Multiple things can be right. Basically, that's kind of like the gist of what I'm trying to say. Is that yeah, I didn't want it, but then there's the question of like, why did I not want it? And there were some fears there, for sure. Some stuff that prevented me from like operating fully, but it was also so yeah, lack of desire, but also lack of experience, because that's another thing. Like my social skills, as far as like compared to other people, they're probably kind of like subpar, comparatively, because basically, as I said, like I didn't really do much. I kind of like pushed everybody away. So during high school, like I wasn't really interacting, and I am neurodivergent, so like that also doesn't always help with me directing. Like I'm fine with myself in the way I do things, particularly because I'm not really hurting anyone, or myself. So there's no reason for me to be any different. But it is something for me to think about, for me to consider that. Yeah, so like I don't. There are situations where I feel free, but I do think that this level of freedom is something that like a decade ago would not have happened. So it came from like me being older, me maturing, growing, developing, and it's important to keep that in mind for other things that I'm trying to become. That I just need time and experience. I think time is easier for me to give myself time. I think experience might be where I kind of get lost, because I have to create the situations, and as I've been mentioning lately, there are various areas of my life where I'm not really used to creating situations. I'm just kind of like waiting for things to happen, and as I said, and you could argue that maybe in some ways like this is getting it's not good, for me, that I have to get out there more, and I'm trying, and I've been making progress. It's interesting because I feel like in the last few days, like last few weeks, I probably had made more progress in a way than I had, a bunch of years combined. Of course, you have to keep in mind that, for you to get to that point where you know, like you can't have that progress. There's like years of like, those years, they were not like empty. They were, you know, something was happening. You know, I was, you know, writing myself. I was getting you know, ready for to change, because I talked about it before. You can't really change people's minds. Like, they have to be willing to change for, you know, words to fall in the, you know, spring. You know, at some point they have to kind of like, you know, accept. And that is, yeah, honestly, like, I'm not really focused on other people anymore, so this is mostly looking at myself. You know, like, I have to be ready, you know, for it to change, for things to change. You have to be in the right mindset. So what I'm trying to do, you know, right now is make sure that, like, I am always in the right mindset for me to just grow and develop. Because as I said, like, I want to embrace myself with all my flaws. And technically, I've been saying that that's what I've been doing for years, but there were some flaws, some shortcomings that I was, for one reason or another, like, not really, I wasn't getting close to those. And, you know, it was being kind of like bad for me, because it meant that I kept being the same person in those regards, and that was not, you know, good, because being that person was not leading to me kind of like having a fulfilling and happy life. You know, that is ultimately what I want. I want to be happy, and I want to keep existing, and I want to keep on wanting to exist. That is, you know, kind of like huge for me, because, you know, your willingness, your desire, like, that is imperative, you know, for anything to happen. So I really need myself to be out there, and or be right here and just want more. You know, I want more from my life, want more for my future. And a part of that, it starts with just me accepting that I am not some things, and that I didn't used to be those things. You know, like, my desire of what I wanted to be has changed, but in a way or another, at least the personality traits I'm thinking of, like the characteristics of mine that they are like on my mind right now, like, they are not like, it's kind of like, you know, like, I haven't been them, you know. And I feel like maybe that's why I was so attached to those traits, you know, is that I wanted to have the opportunity to be like, I'm not like this anymore. But I can't say that I'm not like this anymore, because I was never like that in the first place. And like, right now is when I'm finally ready to, you know, embrace things. And yeah, so number one thing that I mentioned, you know, shyness. It's not like, you know, a value, you know, list. It's just, you know, as you know, it is coming to me. And number one is shyness. That is one that, as I said, I was very skittish about, and I was very determined to kind of like, you know, to not be shy. But right now, I'm like, it is what it is. You know, and pretty much like, if you want to change and improve, you need to actually accept what's happening. Like, I mean, any therapist, any person who has trauma, anyone can tell you that. You know, like, that's not news. But, you know, it was just that I wasn't ready before for certain things, and now I am. Or so I think. Maybe, you know, like, I think that I'm ready for at least some of it. It's okay if I'm not ready for everything, but it is important for me to kind of like acknowledge those things. So shyness is one. Proactivity, that is another one that because, you know, as I mentioned before, I was proactive in some ways, but, you know, throughout like my entire academic experience, like, I've been a little frustrated with myself, even when I was doing well, you know, at the top of my class, because I never really felt like I was doing as much as I could. You know, it felt like, you know, I was getting by, and that is not. And the things like that kind of like accumulated, like that feeling in my mind. And it wasn't until I had my ADHD diagnosis and I started to understand how my brain works that I was like, oh, okay, that happened. You know, it's not that I'm not lazy, I'm not a piece of shit, I'm not, you know, incompetent. It's just my brain doesn't work that way, and there are things we can do to fix it. You know, or not fix it, but, you know, help me, you know, kind of like keep going. But you know, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think academically was one of the areas where I could show proactivity, you know, the most. I could, at least, you know, in the context of you being a teenager, that was kind of like the thing that I wanted. You know, I wanted to do more than what was demanded, than what was asked. And, you know, in a lot of ways I did, but in some others I didn't. I think when it came to like assignments and stuff they have to do, you know, a little more academic, they're, you know, like more research focused and all that, I did better. When it came to like things that had to interact with people, like that was kind of like my downfall. You know, downfall in the sense of like me not really being the person I wanted to be. And you know, it was kind of like a recurring thing. Like, I'm not a good seller at selling things. I don't really have the interest of selling. That is not something, because some people are really good at it. Maybe they don't like it necessarily, but like, those are skills that I'm like really whatever about. Like, not that they're not good, but like for me, I don't necessarily want them. I know it's important in your life for you to be able to sell things because you're constantly selling yourself, out there for whatever you're doing. I think it's important, but I'm not, particularly good at it. And that's something that I can kind of like admit now, that I'm not good at selling, and maybe I should get better. But it's only going to start with me accepting that the element. I think that one heavy hitter is the interaction aspect of that, because for so long I didn't want to interact with anyone, so like that didn't help, that it's so dependent. But I don't know, like I think I just wanna be left alone a lot of the time. So I think that imposing yourself, like doing that, like I don't really love that. And also, like, maybe there is a shyness that we already accepted. There's also like maybe fear of rejection. I don't want to get rejected in that sense, and all valid options, and I think they're all part of it. But yeah, but the point I'm trying to get at is that I haven't necessarily been the most proactive person. I'm quite passive in some ways, and that is another huge one that I really don't want to accept, is that I can be kind of like a passive person at times. Like, this feels like I'm committing a sin, just acknowledging this, like I'm still dealing with this. But it is important to take into account, because as much as I try to highlight the moments when I'm like being active, like there's like maybe more of like me just waiting for things. I think that is kind of like the key expression here, waiting for things, that and I think part of it has to do with like my like mental illness, and me not being like going through episodes. That's the case. But the thing is, like, even when I'm not going through an episode, I feel like I have resigned myself to like a lot of things. I think that is another thing that I have to accept, that I have resigned my life to, I'm not miserable, but like I think that I definitely could have been much more. There's more. I have the capacity in me, although sometimes I don't always feel it, that I have like the capacity. Some days I feel quite incapable. Another thing that I was afraid to admit for the longest time, because I didn't want to acknowledge it, but yeah, I sometimes wonder whether I can actually get things done, and I keep attaching myself to the past. For example, when I was in middle school and high school, and I performed so well, and I was able to do so many things, and accomplish a lot, for that time of your life. And I feel like that is the person that I still see myself as. But when I think about where I've been lately, like the past 5 years, like that's not me. I'm not like that anymore, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that this is one that is harder to accept, but I'm finally saying this out loud. But this is something that it took many years for me to just, accept that, like I'm not. And I don't want to talk about productivity in like, because it's sometimes like the way that we set up things, these days, like it is very, it's not great, like in terms like you demand too much from yourself, you demand more than you can, deliver, and your life is just, the worst because of it. So I'm not talking about, like blind productivity, or, like a certain like capitalistic productivity. I'm thinking more about, there are things I want to do and being able to do them. And for the most part, when I think about, I haven't really been producing. Like, can I even call myself a productive member of society these days? And honestly, this is something that I think it sounds worse when I'm saying it out loud, because I don't care so much for it, when it comes to just me and myself and I. I've kind of like come to accept that, like my life, it does not have to be, the way I envisioned it when I was 17. Like I can have, like I can have different aspirations, I can have different principles, different values, and it doesn't mean I don't have to completely reject the past, like, because that's not healthy. That's not what I want to do. But I can exist right now, because it feels like I have these new principles, these new values, as I said. There are different things that I want right now, but sometimes I still demand for myself as I would have back then. So when I'm looking at myself and where I am at, it feels like failure. And this is something that I feel like it's been very internalized for me, because I think that on the surface it doesn't really seem so, but when I go deep down, I kind of like realize that some of these moments that I'm having, they kind of are, like they, I feel that I am incompetent and incapable sometimes. And these, sometimes I don't feel like that directly. Those are not the feelings. They kind of like get mushed together, and they become this very defeatist attitude, this very defeatist way of looking at life and what I can do and what I can become. And then it can get worse and get to the point where I start having ideation, and like that's not what I want. So I need to just dig deep and really remove, because it feels like there is like a wound yeah, there's a wound, and basically this wound, it kind of like healed. It didn't fully heal, but like the skin is kind of like mended, but it's kind of like infecting. And the other thing is they're infectious, so like this is not necessarily like the biggest one, but it is something to keep in mind, that I have to dig deeper, for me to just see where all these beliefs are. Because like, why do I sometimes feel like I'm feeling? Because sometimes like my feeling that is the case, it becomes this defensiveness that like I don't allow myself to think that, because I'm like, no, this is like it's good, we're doing good. So what exactly am I comparing myself to? And the answer invariably is I'm comparing myself to the person that I wish I was, the person who 17-year-old me envisioned, and that is not and I'm not that person, and I'm not entirely sure I want to be that person. That's me. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to have those immorals, those values. But the whatever I was surrounded with, like that is good. That I would have enjoyed. But as I've established before, just because I had this plan and I had these fantasies, these dreams, it doesn't mean that like they would have come true. Particularly because there's this thing of like me kind of like being very, even when I'm not manic, sometimes I'm a little megalomaniac, like I'm a little stuck in impossibilities, and not in a way that I'm trying to fix them or make them happen, but in a way that I can get them out of my mind. But there's nothing that I'm doing that is actually getting me closer to that. And this is true also for that time, those years, me 18, 17, I was not doing as much as I could. Naturally, there are like the mental health situations happening, so I'm not ignoring them. It's just that like those days I was not doing anything to get to where I wanted to be. I was making like zero effort. I had my afflictions, and I had like everything that I was doing, like it wasn't actually building towards that. It was more, it gave me more a certain relief as it was happening, that I was doing something, but I was not doing anything. That's kind of like the thing about productivity, because sometimes like if you're productive when you're doing something, but sometimes what you're doing is not really adding to anything. So yeah, you're doing something, you're busy, but like you're not accomplishing anything. And that's the thing, that's the truth. Like I had those dreams and fantasies for a long time, and as I said, especially 2016, 2017, I was doing nothing to accomplish those goals. I talked about before how sometimes my professional and academic life, they're like they're intertwined, because one thing ends up like impacting the other. And that was the thing, I was like mostly focusing on my education, wanting to get education, getting somewhere, but like that would not in itself that wouldn't get me anywhere like any other thing. And the thing is, like the truth is, like I had no idea where to start from, like to get what I wanted. Like I was completely lost, and all I had were fantasies. I really didn't have a plan. I was lost, which I talking about me being 18, 19. I think that by hearing this, it's like, yeah, that's pretty normal for the age. It's just that I think I held myself in such a high regard that I wanted to be ready already. It's kind of like I expected myself to be 28, have like all the living and experience at 18, and I didn't. So I was completely lost and confused, and I didn't understand. Sometimes I completely understood why is that things were not happening. And this is something that I have to go back, but it's not like things completely changed in 2016, 2017. I was already not, I think I was kind of like doing the bare minimum in some ways, for me to feel like I was getting somewhere, I was doing something, and I don't know, like I was trying to acquire experience through other people's experiences, but like I think I didn't really have an idea. I had an idea of where I wanted to get, but I had no idea how to get there, and I wasn't planning. I was kind of like stuck, and it feels good to admit this. Like this is something that has been bugging me for many years, and also like I wouldn't really allow myself to properly acknowledge this. So I think I'm going to just leave it here. I'm probably going to have more development, and then I'm going to come back later and I'm going to talk a little bit more, because it feels very liberating. It feels like I'm finally free. I can just acknowledge like everything. I don't have to be stuck or be chained to these pretenses. So yeah, anyways, bye.